In today's video, I am going to reveal for you information that you haven't been shown anywhere else. It's going to leave you with a completely different outlook on this issue with Venezuela. I've long made the allegation that it was going to bleed over into Panama, and it's starting to. The operation of that canal is critical to our economy. The Panamax side, the new side of the canal that allows the transit of these very, very large ships, a lot of the natural gas ships that come out of the United States, relies a great deal upon a company called PDVSA, a Venezuelan company that supplies tugboats. Now, unlike the standard side that uses mules, these little diesel engines that run on train tracks on either side to guide the ships through the canal, over here, they use these large azimuth-driven tugboats, largely piloted and provided by Venezuela. When this opened, the Panamax side opened, the Panamanians did not have the ability themselves to handle the amount of traffic that was going to be showing up. And so they had to contract with Venezuela to do this. It's something else that puts the nail in the coffin of this fake, false narrative of this quote-unquote failed socialist state. If that were the case, we wouldn't have the tugs here, and they wouldn't be able to do what they did. Now, there is a great article out, gccviews.com, talking about how the Panamanians are worried about the Panama Canal Authority going down the road of the PDVSA. See, the PDVSA was infiltrated and overrun with corrupt U.S. oil company officials that were on the take, and they had to basically go in and clean house, and the U.S. didn't like this one bit, and that was also part of the deal of taking down Venezuela. U.S. oil companies now directing U.S. policy, and this is where they talk about over 200 individuals being arrested that were on the payroll of big oil companies down there. Now, in this article that we referred to earlier, there's a very interesting comment they make that will illustrate for us the incredible, nauseating almost, betrayal of the Venezuelan people by the United States. The ACP, meaning the Panama Canal Authority, is our PDVSA. The writer here is, of course, Panamanian. The Venezuelans thought they had won the lottery when Romulo Betancourt nationalized the oil. Really? Romulo Betancourt did that? Wow. I thought the U.S. media told us that it was Hugo Chavez that did that. Afraid not, folks. It was Romulo Betancourt a long time ago. PDVSA became, like the Panama Canal Authority, a state within the Venezuelan state with budgetary independence, which made large contributions to the budget of the same. The dream of every Venezuelan was to be an employee of PDVSA. You can read this for yourself. Like I said, this is www.gccviews.com / you can just type in our PDVSA, or if it's Spanish, you can Nuestra, Nuestra, PDVSA. So we'll leave that there. Now, Romulo Betancourt, interesting individual. He was the president right around the time of World War II. Now, I am going to read these 3 paragraphs for you, and you can speed this up if you want, but it outlines clearly a story you've never heard. In 1941, before AD, this stands for Acción Democrática, this was the political party of Romulo Betancourt, entering into policy making, Venezuela received 85,279,158 bolivars from oil taxes, out of a total oil value of 691 million blah, blah, blah bolivars. Now, I did the math on that. That is 12.3%. Now, stop for a minute and think of this. You have a big oil company come in, and they say that the drilling of oil is going to make your nation wealthy, and it's going to be a blessing, and for their trouble, they're going to give you 12% of the profit. There's not an American out there that would tolerate that one bit. If it was your property and some company came on and said, yeah, we're going to come exploit this natural resource we found on your property, and we're going to give you 12% of it. So what Romulo Betancourt did is he changed the law to 50-50. That was his evil, evil idea of nationalizing the country's oil industry. That of the profits, it was a 50-50 split. What a horrible guy he was. Imagine that. The people of Venezuela actually splitting evenly the profits of the oil that's being drilled out of that country. But it gets better. Now, he didn't technically nationalize it. He just taxed them at that rate. Venezuela's oil riches to benefit Venezuelans. In the late 1940s, Venezuela was producing close to 500 million barrels of oil, and at that time that was a lot. And as production climbed, the tax followed. Venezuela's was the Allies' top oil supplier during the wars. World War II, speaking of here. Betancourt identified this potential to play an important historical role, using the knowledge to his nation's advantage, transforming Venezuela into a global player. Germany then lacked reliable access to oil, limiting troop movements. Some historians identify this vulnerability a deciding factor in Hitler's defeat. Venezuelan oil played a key role. Yeah, that's right. They were our ally. They were the ones supplying us with oil for our tanks, for our invasions, for everything we did in World War II to defeat the Nazis. But now what do? We call them names and we destroy their economy. And if you're still out there laboring under this delusion about socialism, first of all, we'll show you this. This false fake narrative about the mass exodus of Venezuelans. Really? Here's their population growth. It's actually ahead of the world average. And you can go look at, if you want to look up the history of the population of Venezuela, and you will see that it has gone up every year for the last 20, 25 years, over 31 million people now. And if there is some mass exodus, the people that are remaining are having babies at a rate that is completely overtaking that, meaning that they believe in the future. Now, I've used this before. This is a graph that has 3 points of information that you need to understand clearly to show what the American government has done to absolutely betray the Venezuelans after they assisted us in World War II in defeating the Nazis. The green lines you see in the back are the oil revenue in dollars. The lines you see in front are the rates of inflation over the years from 1980 to 2016. The colors denote who was president at the time. Now, by far, clearly you see that in red, right here, this was Hugo Chavez. These were the rates of inflation, historic lows of inflation. In fact, this right here where I'm circling down here, this is 2008. This is when the U.S. lost complete control of its economy almost and nearly tanked. And it did not affect them in the least. In fact, I remember Chavez laughing at George W. Bush when we did QE1 and QE2 and nationalized the banks and used U.S. tax dollars to bail out the too big to fail banks. Wait till they use U.S. tax dollars to bail out the too big to fail oil companies. And they use your deposits to do it. You're going to be laughing it up then. But as we see, revenue skyrocketing, low inflation. But of course, the mass psyop going on in the media was the horrible, horrible, horrible job that was being done there. But then we see something happen in 2014. This was right when Chavez died and Maduro took over. And then we see everything spiral out of control. What they brush under the rug is this is when the U.S. allowed its ban on exporting oil to expire. Changed everything. See, Americans still labor under this delusion that when we find oil in this country, that somehow it belongs to us. We don't find oil. Oil companies do, and they can sell it to anyone they want to. So it really matters not how much oil gets discovered here in America. It's not the property of the American people at all. It's the property of private businesses who are going to sell it to the highest bidder. And if you would make the allegation that that shouldn't be the way, then that makes you a horrible, terrible socialist. So this country that the U.S. has destroyed, at least the value of their currency, is a giant psychological operation being run on the American people because it's not true. And to put the nail in the coffin of this, Well, let's go back here real quick just so we know what we're talking about. Back here, when Chavez took over, as you can see before here, there was this guy in charge that made some very, very questionable decisions, but he was very pro-U.S., and he did something that I don't think a lot of you would agree with. See, this is Rafael Caldera, and he started an economic crisis down there that nearly collapsed him. Caldera also had to handle a vertiginous inflationary spiral and a parallel reduction of the Forex reserves employees generously for the support of the Bolivar in front of the U.S. dollar. On 27 June, he announced the temporary suspension of some constitutional guarantees fundamentally related to private property and free economic activity to allow control of the exchange market. Now remember, this is the pro-U.S. guy. Although Caldera promised during his campaign never to accept the help of the IMF, his government rescinded the vow due to the economic crisis. The effect of the interventionist on the economy of Venezuela led Caldera to announce the Agenda Venezuela program, which promised to restore the macroeconomic balance and to beat inflation. This is what they want for Venezuela now. This is what they've been trying to do for Venezuela, to get the big oil companies back in here, because that's what the IMF does. They give you this enormous loan of billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars. They want to dollarize their economy, but it comes with a cost. That means you have to allow big private businesses to come in and take over vast swaths of your economy. And this is the lie. And if it doesn't work in Venezuela, they're going to target Guyana right next to them. This is a story they're not telling you, how Texaco and Exxon have been moving in here and running this same scam on Guyana, and how they're going to try to come in and promise all of these riches. But because, of course, there are no labor standards down here, when their people are dying and injured and contaminated for years and years and years and years, oil companies aren't going to do a thing about it. See, that was the other thing under Romulo Betancourt, too. That he said, okay, oil companies, yeah, it's going to be a 50-50 split, but you are also going to improve worker conditions and pay. And you're not going to treat our people like this never-ending supply of slave labor. So that's where we'll leave it. I know it's 13 minutes. I don't normally go this long, but do understand that there have been some decisions made at the highest levels of our government that would make most people very nauseous. And they have absolutely no standing whatsoever to talk about how a country should or shouldn't be run, especially vis-a-vis oil. So we'll leave it there. Like, share, subscribe.